She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Fragile skull, I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know, and she's got me living in a chemical oven.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. Halloween was great, but we are back to business as usual and there's no shortage of horrendous crimes happening all over the world. It's crazy. And, we had a great Halloween, but now I want to, throw in some coffee and crime times before we dive into our next big series, which is serial killer Dennis Nilsen. That is coming, but I wanted to have a couple coffee and crime times first to kind of catch up on, I guess, what's going on in the world. And one of the worst cases that I've ever encountered happened just last month in Houston, Texas. I'm so pissed, by the way, guys. I'm so pissed about this. I'm not going to hold back because I'm in that kind of mood today where I could have a filter and I could, be non-judgmental and understanding and compassionate, but it's just not how I feel today. So I am freaking pissed about this case. And I want to acknowledge that I know cases involving children are tough for a lot of people, and I know this because they're extremely painful to me, for me, while I'm researching them. So just do what I do. Instead of, feeling sad, get pissed off. Get pissed off, okay? Because anger is the only productive emotion. It's also a belief of mine, and I've been upfront with you guys about this before, that we don't talk about these cases just to talk about them, right? We don't talk, it's not entertainment. We talk about them so we can hopefully learn something. We can have enough knowledge in our brains, knowledge is power, so that maybe we, as a collective, as individuals, can prevent these things from happening. Obviously, we can't fix the world. We can't just completely banish evil and cruelty from the world, but one person at a time, And if we pay attention to these cases, we pay attention to the patterns, we'll know what to look for. We'll know what we're capable of doing and really what others are capable of doing, because we underestimate people, man. People are really capable of the cruelest, most horrible shit. It's just disgusting. And hopefully watching these videos, it teaches us what we're capable of doing, how we can help, who we can reach out to for help. And when innocent children are involved who most of the time don't have control over what happens to them, it's extremely important that we are constantly on alert, remaining vigilant in our own communities. So, that was that, right? But before we dive in, let's have a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. And as somebody who loves food, but also loves, ease, simplicity, I love HelloFresh, okay? The days are getting shorter. The kids are back to school. That means the pressure to get dinner on the table, like at a certain time each night, it's hitting me earlier and earlier as each day goes by, and it's being like dark at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I've been so busy with work. I've been traveling for work. Grocery shopping and meal planning are like so low on my list of things that I want to do. I don't even think they're on the list. Enter HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. With HelloFresh, you can get mouth-watering seasonal recipes and fresh pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door. HelloFresh offers a variety of quick meal options like 20-minute dinners or oven-ready pizzas. HelloFresh also has more 5-star recipes than any other meal kit. And instead of the food sitting on the shelf waiting for you to purchase it, HelloFresh gets the produce to you fast, so it arrives at peak freshness and flavor. So it's actually coming from the farm and then HelloFresh is sending it to you rather than it coming from the farm, sitting at the grocery store for a week, and then you pick it up, and then 3 hours later your bananas are dead. You know what I mean. HelloFresh cuts out stressful meal planning and prepping. They give you the ingredients you need in the amounts you need, so food waste is a thing of the past, which is one of my favorite things because I always buy way too much and then I end up throwing out so much and I cannot stand doing that. And using HelloFresh saves you time and money. Skip the long trips to the grocery store. Save up to 30% by using HelloFresh versus grocery store shopping. I love HelloFresh because they do all the work for me. I don't have to think, I can just act, which is a really nice break after using my brain all day long. And I love cooking with my husband. He cracks me up because he takes it so seriously, and I just spend the whole time bugging him and hiding ingredients and watching him get frustrated. We even get the kids in on the fun because HelloFresh is so easy to use. They send recipe cards with step-by-step instructions and pictures, so it's basically impossible to screw up. You can just cook with your family, have fun, and then enjoy a nice meal together. So if you want to make your life easier, check out HelloFresh. All you have to do is click the link in the description box or go to HelloFresh.com and use my code stephanieharlowe14 to get 14 free meals plus 3 free gifts and free shipping. Thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. On October 24th, 2021, the Harris County Sheriff's Office received a bone-chilling call from a 15-year-old boy. Now, before the boy had placed this call to the police, he sent a text to his mother, 35-year-old Gloria Williams of Houston, Texas. In this text, he told his mother that he could not do it anymore, and then he picked up the phone, called the police, and told them that he and his 2 younger brothers, aged 9 and 7, had been left alone in this unfurnished apartment for months. But worse than that, they'd been trapped in this apartment and forced to live with the skeletal remains of their dead brother for a year. For a year they lived this way. Sheriff deputies responded to the West Oaks apartment complex on Green Crest Drive in Houston, Texas, and they walked into a scene that was the worst thing that any of them had encountered. The apartment was in horrendous condition. There wasn't one stick of furniture in any of the rooms. The carpets were filthy, covered in garbage. There were no blankets or bedding to be seen anywhere in the apartment, and there were roaches and flies everywhere. It was infested. The 3 boys were malnourished and thin, and the youngest boy had broken bones in his face from a previous injury that had gone untreated and developed into a terrible infection, as injuries tend to do when they are left untreated. Once the children had been fed and brought to the police station, they began to tell investigators a story of terror, pain, and trauma. Kendrick Lee was the name of the 8-year-old boy whose remains had been found sitting out in the open in the apartment. So you've got 3 little boys ranging in ages from, I believe, 7 to 15, who are alive but sick, malnourished, and then you have this dead child whose body was just laying on the floor in the apartment. And obviously by this time it's been a year. His body's decomposed, and he's basically just a skeleton. Police found out that the young child, Kendrick, had been beaten to death by the boyfriend of his mother. This man is 32-year-old Brian Coulter. This is reported to have happened around Thanksgiving of 2020, and an autopsy showed that Kendrick had died of homicidal violence due to multiple blunt force injuries. According to 2 of the boys who sadly witnessed the brutal death of their brother, they saw Brian Coulter repeatedly punch Kendrick in his face and various other places on his body, and when Kendrick fell to the ground, Coulter continued to kick him even when he stopped moving. Kendrick's younger brother told police that while this was happening, he made eye contact with Kendrick until eventually Kendrick's eyes turned black, he stopped moving, and stopped blinking because he was dead. At that point, Brian Coulter covered his body with a blanket and left the child there until Kendrick's mother, Gloria, entered the room. When she saw what her boyfriend had done to her son, she allegedly began crying and yelling, told the other children to leave the room while she and Brian argued. According to Gloria, Kendrick's mother, Brian told her that he was sorry. He had lost it, and he had just continued punching Kendrick until he went to sleep. The surviving children told the police that after their brother was dead, Brian and Gloria would often lock them in a room with Kendrick's body. The oldest son also reported that he would be locked in a room by Brian and forced to listen helplessly while his remaining brothers were beaten. And then in March of 2021, Gloria and Brian moved out. They relocated to an apartment about 15 to 20 minutes away from the West Oaks apartment complex. But they moved alone. They left the 3 remaining boys to live in squalor. next to the decomposing body of their brother. Gloria and Brian told the boys that they could not leave the apartment, but later Gloria would tell the police that she checked on them every 2 weeks and brought food. She also kept up the lease on the apartment that they were living in so that nobody would discover the terror that had occurred there, and probably because she just didn't want to live with them. Reports say that she was paying the rent, but this rent was being paid for with government assistance. Gloria's cousin Yasmin Craig told reporters, quote, "We factor she paid the rent with disability checks that she gained from the kids, and that's all we can figure," end quote. And while Gloria and Brian were living it up, living the single life, the childless life in their bachelor pad, taking pictures of themselves clinking margarita glasses together and devouring large plates of food, Gloria's 3 sons cowered in a dark, roach-infested apartment, starving. The 15-year-old son would later tell law enforcement that he had believed his mother was going to save them, that she was going to call the police and they were going to be rescued and escape from Brian. But she never did. She just left with the man who had murdered her son, and she turned her back completely on every single one of her remaining children. And according to police, Gloria and Brian moved to a different apartment because they didn't want to be around Kendrick's body. So who are Gloria Williams and Brian Coulter? Honestly, I don't even know where to start because these people are trash, man. They are scum of the earth, trash, lowest possible life form. And as such, there's plenty of information and evidence to support and prove their next level degeneracy. So if it feels like I'm jumping around a little bit and not delivering you this information in an organized timeline, I apologize, but I want to make sure to include as much as possible. So let's start with who Gloria was, using interviews from those who knew her to piece together this puzzle. According to Melody Robinson, who is the grandmother of one of Gloria's children, Gloria had a total of 6 kids, all from different fathers, ranging in ages from 7 to 17. Now, currently, 2 of Gloria's children are living with Melody, and those are Gloria's 2 oldest daughters. Melody met Gloria in 2005 when Gloria was dating Melody's son, and at that time, she only had 2 children, fathered by 2 different men. Melody said, quote, "She was never a fit mom to me. I would always get on her to keep the house clean and keep the kids clean. She was unstable and easily manipulated," end quote. When Gloria and Melody's son broke up, they weren't a couple anymore, Melody didn't see Gloria again until she turned up on her doorstep holding a 2-week-old baby girl. Gloria asked Melody to care for the baby, and then Gloria moved to Baton Rouge after reconnecting with the father of her first and oldest daughter. Later, Gloria came back and took the baby back, but when the girl was 2 years old and Gloria was pregnant again, Gloria brought the daughter back to Melody and gave up custody of her.
Mom was very unstable. She was sleeping on the floor at her grandmother's house with the babies. And so I just asked her to give her to me.
Gloria had another daughter who was 17 in 2020, and even though this girl was not Melody's granddaughter by blood, she took her in as well when the daughter was kicked out of her mother's apartment after trying to step in and prevent Brian from abusing her little brothers. So basically, Brian is beating the crap out of her brothers. This girl is like, "You gotta stop, you can't do that." And Gloria was like, "You don't talk to my man that way," and kicked this 15-year-old girl out on the street where she lived for a year and then ended up in the hospital, at which point authorities contacted Melody, who took this girl in so that she and her half-sister could be together. Melody said that sometimes the 2 sisters would FaceTime with their brothers, but it became more difficult because Gloria didn't like the girls talking to their brothers, and she tried to prevent it whenever she could. Sometimes the girls would talk to their 15-year-old brother on FaceTime, and they said it was clear he was talking to them from a dark room, probably the room he was locked in with his brother's body. But he never told them that his brother and their brother Kendrick was dead because he was terrified of Brian, and he'd been threatened within an inch of his life to stay silent. Linda Smith, the grandmother of Gloria's youngest son, I believe, she said that Gloria and her children lived with her for a time in 2014 after her son and the father of Gloria's son went to prison. Gloria was eventually asked to leave the home because I guess she was bringing all these different guys there to have sex with them. And Linda was like, "You shouldn't do that. This is my house. Also your kids are here. Please stop bringing strange men to my house." And Gloria was like, "Okay, I will." But then she would keep bringing the men to the house. But aside from that, Linda feels that Gloria was a good and decent person when she knew her. Linda Smith said, quote, "I know she didn't drink or do drugs when she was living with me. All of this happened after she met him. When I saw her picture on the news, she was like somebody else. I couldn't imagine her ever being like that. I never saw her like that. She wasn't like that when she was around me," end quote. The last time Linda saw her grandson, she said he was being quiet, withdrawn, and she claimed she could see that something was wrong. Something had happened and that there was clearly neglect happening. On August 31st, 2021, Gloria texted Linda Smith and asked if she had heard from her son. So remember, Linda Smith's son was Gloria's ex-boyfriend. He went to prison, and so Gloria's calling to ask Linda, "What's up with your son? How is he?" And Linda was like, "He's fine. He's fine. How's my grandson doing?" And Gloria responded that he was good, but that her mother, Hazel, was in the hospital because she'd had a stroke. Gloria wrote in this text, quote, "She can't breathe on her own. She's been in the hospital for 2 weeks, so I'm going through a hard time right now," end quote. Let me just mention that she spelled through, going through a hard time, T-H-R-E-W. Normally, I wouldn't make fun of people for their spelling, but in this case, I'm going to make an exception. This text came. It was sent to Linda Jones after Kendrick was dead, and after Gloria had left her other children to starve in this apartment with his body. And by the looks of her Instagram, Gloria wasn't going through a hard time at all. She was having the time of her life, living this free-flying life with her piece of shit boyfriend, Brian Coulter. In fact, she began to call Brian her husband. They got matching tattoos that said warrior. Fun fact, Brian Coulter had a lot of tattoos, including one that says family over everything, because apparently this was his thing. This was like his motto. This was his brand, family over everything. Oh, if you could say how ironic in a case like this, I would. Brian loved posting on Instagram about how important Gloria and her children were to him, and his Instagram account is actually called FOE Productions. FOE stands for family over everything, and he often used that tag FOE in his posts. These posts where he would be like, "Oh my God, family's so important. I love my wife. I love her kids. Like, a strong family is the most important thing." Like, what a freaking hypocrite. Gloria and Brian also both loved to show off jewelry. So for Valentine's Day, there was pictures where Gloria had all this jewelry on, and Brian and Gloria made sure to let everyone know who was following them that this jewelry was real, okay? No fake stuff for them. What is it about the name Brian and being the most obnoxious asshat on Instagram, right? Brian Coulter, Brian Laundrie, asshats. Melody Robinson, remember she's the grandmother of Gloria's daughter. She told reporters that Gloria did not have her life together. Really? You think? No shit. Gloria doesn't have her life together. She also said that many family members had reached out offering help, but Gloria would not let anyone close enough. When Kendrick was born, Gloria's aunt offered to help and even begged Gloria to let her raise Kendrick, but Gloria refused. Gloria's cousin, Yasmin Craig, said, quote, "We knew that with all of these kids, eventually, she was not going to be able to be the best parent she could be," end quote. That's not the truth. That's not the truth. You can have a lot of kids and be a good parent. You absolutely can. My grandmother, 16 kids, and she was a saint. But Gloria, who didn't want help from anyone, she didn't have any problem asking these same people for money when she was running low, which was often, even though at the same time she's asking for money, she's flashing these real jewels on Instagram. And Gloria never told anyone where she was living with her children. Like, she would give them a general area. She told them what apartment complex, but they never got an apartment number. Yasmin told the media that every 3 to 6 months Gloria would move or change her phone number, so they felt it was impossible to track her down. And when she was asked about the kids by her family members, Gloria would respond that they were fine and going to school. But that wasn't true. Kendrick was reported to have missed 12 days of school as the 2019 academic year began. So right off the bat, as soon as school starts, Kendrick's absent all the time. The school left multiple voicemails for Gloria. These calls went unanswered. On the day of the 12th absence, someone from the school district performed a home visit, but no one answered the door. In 2020, the district filed truancy papers on Gloria, but nothing ever happened. It was never followed up on. Surprise, surprise. And even though CPS has admitted they do have a history with this family, they've refused to give any more details, citing confidentiality. So this is something I've noticed. I don't know if you have. I'm sure that many of you have. Every time a child dies due to abuse or neglect, like this case, CPS gets involved and then they tell the media, yes, we do have a prior history with this family, meaning, yes, we are aware of this family. We are aware that these kids were not in the best situation. We've had interactions with them, but now we don't want to tell you what those interactions were because it's going to make it seem like we ignored red flags, that we clearly knew what was happening and didn't intervene to protect and save these children. So that's what's happening here. That's my opinion, though. Allegedly. Don't come for me. I don't care. But if you look at it and you think about this, timing. Timing also is a big factor in what happened here. Because this was not just an issue with poor Kendrick, but it is and has been an issue with many more children everywhere. Bob Sanborn, the president and CEO of Children at Risk, which is a nonprofit organization, he said, quote, "It was very easy for these kids to fall through the cracks. Texas has always relied on teachers to be that line of first defense for child abuse, and these kids never got to that place where a teacher could identify what was going on with them," end quote. A surge in child abuse cases has been on the rise since the start of the COVID-19 lockdowns, and physical abuse of school-aged children tripled during the months of isolation. A combination of shutdowns, job losses, and economic hardship has increased parental stress, and massive school closures mean less in-person contact with adults who would be able to notice the warning signs like teachers and doctors and counselors. During the pandemic, Houston area schools lost touch with nearly 190,000 children, and the Houston Chronicle reported that as classrooms became vacant and instruction turned virtual, many kids rarely, if ever, connected. Estella Olgun, a spokesperson for the Harris County Resources for Children and Adults, said, quote, "There's been so many events that have happened in the last year or two, from the pandemic to the civil unrest to the power outages and Arctic freeze in Texas in February. And to think of those children having to fend for themselves and do this all alone and not even have the basic necessities that they need, it is unbelievable," end quote. Between September of 2019 and August of 2020, 251 children in the state of Texas died from child abuse or neglect, and an additional 92 cases almost resulted in the death of a child. And I just want to make a point of clarification, because I know how some of you get. Man. Crazy. I'll be talking about a case that happened in, Italy, and the stats around why this case happened, like the context, the background, the science. And then I'll get comments like, well, this happens everywhere, not just in Italy. This happens in the United States, too. No shit, man. I know. I freaking know. I also know that child abuse cases were on the rise in every state of the country, in every country in the world during the pandemic and the close downs, not just Texas. The only reason I gave you Texas stats was because we're talking about a case in Texas. So I am no way saying that this only happens in Texas. And I'm no way singling Texas out and giving you these stats to try to make Texas look bad, because that's what you guys seem to be accusing me of when you come at me like that. No, that's not what's happening. I'm giving you the relevant information for the case we're talking about. And if I wanted to give you the stats of child abuse in every single state in the country, then that would be what this video was. It would just be an hour of me reading off statistics. So obviously I can't do that. But yes, I am aware that this happens everywhere. Thank you. I'm sorry I'm in such a sassy, pissed off mood today. But I mean what I said. I could have said it nicer, but I don't feel like it. So basically, the long and short of that is, obviously, the government felt we had to put everybody into isolation and lockdowns for public health, whatever. I'm not going to comment on that, whether it was wrong or right, because it's not my decision, and it's not, thankfully, not a decision I will ever have to make. But what you have here is you may be saving people from the virus, but what you're doing is you're putting people, children, women, even men, into potentially bad situations by trapping them in their homes with their abusers. And then everybody's crammed in, everybody's stressed out, everybody's scared because they're turning on the news every day, and freaking CNN and Fox News are over here like, the death toll rises, and everybody's gonna have a heart attack every single day because we feel like the world's gonna end at any moment. Okay? Everyone's on edge. And now you have people who are already abusive before any of this, and you add in the stress and the anxiety of, losing your job, not being able to walk out of your house, being constantly afraid that if you do walk out of your house, you're going to die and become a statistic on the news. And so now this obviously escalates what's happening already. And this is what happened. And we know that this is true. We also had a rise in depression. We had a rise in drug abuse. We had a rise in alcohol abuse. We had rises in suicide, drug overdoses. It was bad. Bad news bears. I wonder if you look at all of the deaths that happened as a result of the lockdowns, if they would be equal or close to the deaths from COVID-19. It's a crazy thought. Anyways, who's Brian Coulter? Who is Brian Coulter? What's he all about besides, beating defenseless babies to death? We don't really know much about his background. This is a newer case, so I'm sure that more will come out. People will start talking and being like, yeah, I knew Brian in high school. Guy was crazy. So as of now, there's not too much about who he was in his past, how he came to be in Houston, how he came to meet Gloria, things like that. We do know that he is a living piece of human garbage, right? And we also know that Brian Coulter was arrested on November 23rd, 2020, the same month he murdered Kendrick, the manager of a Buc-ee store in Luling, Texas, about 140 miles west of Houston. He called the police and he was like, hey, can you guys come here and do a welfare check on this customer who appears to be intoxicated, and also, bonus, he seems to be armed. So the responding officers tracked Brian down to the parking lot of the store, the gas station, convenience store. What is it? I don't know. We don't have Buc-ee's here. Brian was sitting in the driver's seat, and next to him sat his girlfriend, his love of his life, Gloria. In his report, the responding officer said, quote, I knocked on the driver's side window to get the attention of Coulter, whom I instructed to place his hands on the steering wheel. I had to instruct Coulter many times to place his hands on the steering wheel. When I opened the door to detain Coulter, I immediately detected the strong, pungent odor of marijuana emitting from his persona and the cab of the vehicle, end quote. The strong, pungent odor of marijuana. This officer needs to write books, man, right? I could smell it. I could taste it. The police officer asked Brian if he had a gun, to which Brian responded, do I have a gun? When asked again, Brian said, yes, he did have a gun. It was in the waistband of his pants, but he had a license to carry it. However, the officer felt that Brian was speaking very slowly. His whole behavior, his speech was lethargic, so the police thought maybe narcotics could have been involved. Now, when Brian and Gloria were asked where they were coming from and where they were going, which is a typical question, when you get pulled over, the cops are like, where are you coming from? Where are you going? Brian responded that they were traveling from Houston to Houston. I hope we have a video recording of this. And Gloria next to him quickly chimed in and she was like, no, we're traveling from Houston to San Antonio. Turns out both of them were wrong because they were traveling from San Antonio back to Houston, but whatever. Details. Both Gloria and Brian denied having any drugs, but in the center console, police found an envelope containing marijuana, and the envelope had Brian's name on it. Brian Coulter on the envelope of marijuana. What an idiot he is. What an idiot. This isn't your lunch. This isn't your lunch that you brought from home, and you're going to put it in the break room fridge, and you want to make sure your name's on it so, your coworkers don't eat your food. You dumbass. You don't put your name on an envelope of marijuana. You definitely don't. Especially in Texas, Brian. What the heck? I mean, you could do that in California. Yeah. You can do that in New York. Definitely Oregon, not Texas. I mean, I feel like the cop was more shocked by the marijuana than the gun in Brian's waistband, right? He's like, oh, you got a gun? All right, cool. You got any drugs? You got some of that wacky tobacco, some of the devil's lettuce? And then they pulled it out of the center console and they were like, oh, I knew I smelled that strong pungent odor. I knew it. More marijuana was found in Gloria's purse, and Brian was booked into the Caldwell jail, where he made bail 6 days later. It was $1,000 he was able to come up with, even though Gloria's always asking her family for money. And at that point, when he came up with the bond, he was released. Now, based on the timeline, law enforcement believes this arrest happened just 2 days. 2 days after little Kendrick was brutally murdered. Luling Chief of Police Bill Sala said, quote, the timeline is disturbing. One of the issues was that he was tired because they had driven from Houston to San Antonio and were on their way back to Houston, so they were driving all day, end quote. Brian was probably also tired because it gets exhausting, carrying on all that ice, all those real jewels. You just get so tired. It's heavy. Heavy as the head that wears the real jewel crown. 2 weeks before Gloria's 15-year-old son had finally had enough and called the police, Brian Coulter called the Luling police and demanded his gun to be returned to him. So they took it when they arrested him, probably took his labeled marijuana too. And he was like, guys, you can't take that. My name's on it. But they took his gun. And then he calls and he wants it back. And the chief of police, Bill Sala, said, quote, in a highly intoxicated state, he did cuss out my administrative assistant, and she told him I would call him back, which I have not, end quote. I like this guy. I like Bill Sala, man. He's hilarious. Apparently, Brian had a problem with alcohol, and drugs. He has many Instagram videos where he's bragging about being drunk and high pretty much all of the time. And in one of these videos, he said, quote, "I smoke mad weed. I drink mad. Look, I just do my fair share of things, okay?" End quote. Now, I'm not judging. Be drunk and high all day if you want, okay? It's my aspiration and dream to one day do that. That's what I want to be when I grow up. But I think that there was more involved here than alcohol and marijuana. It's just a sneaking suspicion. But clearly Brian was also, an alcoholic, and Gloria's youngest son told the police that when Brian would drink, he would become very strong, and the abuse would be relentless. So the police go to the apartment. They take these 3 boys, and after they made sure that the kids were safe with CPS, they tracked down Brian and Gloria and questioned them on Monday, October 25th. Brian and Gloria were released that same day without any charges, but the next day on October 26th, Brian and Gloria were arrested in front of the public library where they'd been looking up news articles about themselves. Like, you can afford all these real jewels and your margaritas and thousands of dollars for bail, but you can't, afford internet at home? You don't have internet at home? Why are you at the public library? Do you not have a computer or a cell phone or internet? It was also discovered that just because Gloria and Brian had not been living with the children, that didn't mean that the abuse from Brian had stopped. Just 3 weeks before his arrest, Brian had punched the youngest boy in the face. This kid's 7, 8. Punched him in the face. And the boy told the police that his mother knew about the injury, but she did not bring him to the doctor, so it went untreated and eventually turned into a bad infection. This poor child is now going to have to undergo facial reconstruction surgery because of how bad it was. The question that I'm sure is on everyone's mind is, why didn't someone say something or call someone? How could a small child be murdered and no one noticed he was gone? How could 3 children be left alone for months in an apartment and no one noticed? The answer is, the people suck. I'm just kidding, kind of. But check this out. I just came back from Philadelphia. I was working on a project there, and whenever I'm in a new city, I like to look through their news articles, see what's going on there. And I encountered something very disturbing that is a sign to me that society is really, really going downhill, really going the wrong way. So a woman in Philly was boarding a train, and she was followed onto the train by a man who proceeded to sexually harass and assault her for more than 40 minutes. Now, this was not an empty train. It was filled with helpful citizens who did not intervene as he ripped her pants down and raped her. But plenty of people pulled out their cell phones and recorded it happening. No 911 calls were placed from the other people on the train. No one tried to help her, and no one tried to stop her attacker from raping her in public, even though there were several of them. And only one of him. All it would have taken was 3 or 4 guys to pull this dickhead off of her, beat his ass to a pulp, and it's over. But no one did anything. This is typically called the bystander effect. Now, experts in the field of psychology are now trying to figure out why no one helped this woman on the train. And psychiatrist Dr. Sumaya Dave feels that some people may have been afraid to intervene. Dr. Dave said, quote, "People might freeze when they see something really scary, especially if the person who's committing the crime or doing the attack has a weapon or seems like they could be overpowering. When nobody is doing anything, it just perpetuates no one else doing anything. There's a lack of awareness in general about how to best intervene in different situations," end quote. A lack of awareness of how to best intervene. Okay, how to best intervene. But, at least you would consider intervening, right? And why did they take videos of the attack but not do anything to stop it? According to Dr. Dave, they felt that recording the attack was the best way they could help the victim. This is according to Dr. Dave, man. I would like to talk to these people face-to-face in person and be like, why'd you do that? Because I think Dr. Dave is giving them a little too much credit, because nope, this ain't it. The best way to help a woman being raped in front of your eyes is to do something to stop it, especially when the attacker's so greatly outnumbered. You don't pull out your phone and record it. But no, not one person looked around and said, guys, I think we should do something here. This doesn't feel right. This seems wrong. Not freaking one person. This just happened like a week and a half ago. All right? It's disgusting. Society is going downhill. We are all so distant from each other, so separate. We're all afraid to talk to each other, right? We all have masks on, so nobody can even see what our emotions are. God forbid you have a mask on and sunglasses. No one can tell how I'm feeling. I remember I was just in the airport, and I had a mask on and then my sunglasses, because I always wear sunglasses in the airport because, people think I'm famous. But I had these things on, and I remember a security guard said something to me, and I responded by smiling at her, like a normal person. And then I kept walking, and I'm like, She could not tell I was smiling at her. She can't see my face. She can't see my eyes. She thinks I'm staring at her in a blank way. It's so weird not being able to see people's faces. We become so disconnected, and we're all afraid to get close to each other, even especially strangers, because they might give us a virus. And everybody is out there worried about themselves. They're worried about number one. And I get it. I'm also worried about myself, but in a situation when you see somebody being harmed, you have to do something. You have to. Something. I don't freaking throw like a cup of coffee at the dude's head. Like distract him. Do something. Say, what's that? The police? And at least so he can pull off of her and, be distracted, and maybe you'll get do something. Okay, I'm not gonna talk about this anymore. I'm so pissed. And in this case with Kendrick, we have something very similar. But in my opinion, it's almost worse, because there would have been no fear of being in danger. It's not like you're watching the attack happen. It wasn't as if no one noticed that something was going on over at Gloria's apartment. Many people suspected something was up, and many more knew that these children were being neglected. Neighbors reported smelling a foul odor coming from that apartment for months. The neighbor directly next door claimed she'd complained to the building's management several times, and she eventually had to turn off her air conditioning so the smell wouldn't travel into her apartment through the vents. A neighbor who lived in the apartment building across from Gloria's said that sometimes at night she could see the 15-year-old boy through the window, because there was no blinds or drapes, and she would see him go to sleep on the floor at night, but she claimed to think nothing of it, because, some people are financially struggling and going without beds, apparently. Another neighbor recalled seeing the 15-year-old boy pacing the floors of the apartment and stopping sometimes to gaze out the window. In early October, another neighbor saw Brian Coulter emerge from the apartment with one of the younger boys. Brian leaned over, said something to the boy, and then punched him in the face, and then they got into Brian's car and drove away. This neighbor claims she didn't call anyone because she felt that Brian had been disciplining the boy, not abusing him, and Brian hadn't punched him that hard. A woman named Erica Chapman, who lived in the complex, was well aware that the teenage boy was being neglected. She said the first time she had seen him, he was sleeping on one of the slides. There's a playground located on the apartment complex property. He was sleeping on the slide. She could tell that he was not being fed because of how sick and thin he looked, so about 6 months before he called the police, she started giving him food. But he would only take packaged food. He never wanted anything cooked. And according to another neighbor named Trevor Thompson, who'd also been helping the boy, this was because the 15-year-old was paranoid and afraid of being poisoned. Trevor Thomas said, quote, "A few times I noticed the lights weren't on and it was quiet upstairs, so I figured there was trouble because the parents hadn't been there in a while. One day he came and knocked on my door and asked if he could use a charger, and we built a bond from there. I started offering him food because I knew he needed more than just a charger." End quote. Both Erica Chapman and Trevor Thomas said that they didn't call anyone or report this to the authorities because they didn't understand how bad the situation really was, and they didn't want to kind of pry or ask the 15-year-old questions or encourage him to elaborate on his situation because they were afraid that he would get nervous and scared and disappear, and then no one would be there to give him food and help him. Most of the neighbors admitted that they knew the 15-year-old was living in the apartment and that the adults were rarely around, like never, but they had no idea that 2 younger boys were also living with him in the apartment, even though that one neighbor saw Brian leave with the younger boy. But okay, guys, whatever you say. And some might say that 15 years old is old enough to know better, old enough to be able to get some help when you aren't under the eye of your abuser. But this kid was terrified. Not only did he know that Brian had murdered his little brother, but he had also been a victim of abuse at the hands of Brian, and he'd been forced to sit there and watch and listen to his other brothers being beaten. This 15-year-old kid was scared shitless, and he truly believed, as he should have, that his mother would not let what happened be swept under the rug. The child looked to the adult to do the adult thing and protect her children, but she didn't. She just posted on Instagram about how much she loved her husband Brian, even after she knew that he murdered her son. So let's talk about why she did that. Of course, the police asked her why she had allowed Brian to get away with the murder of her son, and she claimed she didn't tell the police because Brian had told her not to, and she was also afraid that if she went to the police, the rest of her children would be taken away, and I call bullshit on this so hard on this. Bullshit, Gloria, bullshit. Gloria was afraid her children would be taken from her, so afraid to be without them, that she left them in a filthy apartment with the body of their dead brother while she gallivanted around and drank margaritas with his murderer. She was not afraid of losing her children. She was afraid of getting caught, getting into trouble, and that's why she never said anything. And I would go so far as to say that she didn't notify the authorities and she didn't do anything because she probably didn't care all that much that her child had been brutally murdered. A mother, a real mother, would never behave in this way. And I don't care if you think I'm being judgmental, because I am, and I know I am, and I think it's warranted, and I don't care. If she had loved Kendrick, she would have gone to the police, even knowing that she might get into trouble. So really, everyone failed these kids. I'm not trying to make these neighbors feel more guilty than I'm sure they already feel, because I know that they're good people, because they helped. They helped him as much as they thought they could. But this is why these videos and this content is important, because maybe if these neighbors had seen a video like this and they'd heard how stuff like this can happen, and how even though you see something and you don't think it's that bad, what you're seeing is just the tip of the iceberg, maybe they would have stepped in and called somebody. I understand that it's human psychology to, distance yourself, cognitive dissonance, a diffusion of responsibility. This isn't my child. This isn't my problem. I feel bad. I'm going to do what I can, but somebody else is going to solve this problem. It's not for me to solve. I understand that when you're dealing with children, it takes a village, man. It takes a village, and the community needs to step in, especially in these times when teachers and doctors aren't seeing children as regularly as they should be. So I'm sure these people feel horrible, and I don't want them to think that I'm coming for them. I want them to know that there is something to be learned here. If you see a child who's clearly been abandoned by his mother, who's living in an apartment with no adult supervision and who clearly does not have enough food, you need to call someone. You can remain anonymous, but you need to call someone. Texas law states that anyone who suspects child neglect or abuse must report it within 48 hours, and this anyone includes any people who have had contact with the child or children, including their teachers, their doctors, and yes, their neighbors. I understand if they thought the situation wasn't as bad as it actually was, but even without it being as bad as it actually was, it was still bad, right? Like, this kid's sleeping on slides, his mom's never around, and he's starving, and he's afraid to take food from you because he's paranoid about being poisoned at 15. It's bad. And this smell coming from the apartment that multiple neighbors noticed, the smell that we now realize was Kendrick's decomposing body. None of the neighbors called the police about it. Let me tell you, a dead body has a distinctive smell. The smell of rotting flesh, it's unmistakable, okay? I used to work downtown at my dad's restaurant. It was an old building, and very, very old building. And so animals would get up into like the ceiling, and then they would freeze during the winter. And then when the snow and everything would thaw in the spring, oh my God, the smell. Oh, it was horrible. I'll never forget it for as long as I live. It's a very distinctive smell. This isn't a smell where people could be like, what is that, garbage? What is that? What is the smell? Somebody cooking, spoiled food? What's happening? Like, it's very distinctive. Not one person called the police and complained about it. They called management and complained, and management was like, we'll take care of it. And I guess in the month leading up to this discovery, the apartment complex management was doing like these, random walkthroughs of the apartments. They didn't figure it out either. And this lady who was complaining lived right next door to the apartment where the smell was coming from. So you'd think that'd be one of the first apartments they would check. If you see something, say something. If you smell something, say something. And you can do that by calling the Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4A-CHILD or 1-800-422-4453, or go to childhelp.org. You will remain completely anonymous. It is so easy, and then you can go to bed at night knowing that at least you did something. And honestly, Gloria's family should have gotten more involved. I know they weren't even really technically her family. It was like the family of her kids. But they should have gotten involved. They don't know where she lives. They can't find her. But they literally said they were begging her to take the kids. One of the grandmothers said, I knew there was neglect happening. You don't need to find Gloria. You don't need to find that bitch to help, right? Just call the police. Be like, yo, this chick, Gloria, she's got the kids. We feel like something's going on. We see neglect. We see abuse. She won't, tell us where she is. We haven't really even seen these kids in months. Can you do a welfare check on them? So easy. And the school is like, yeah, Kendrick doesn't come to school for 12 days. And then the next school year, he started missing more school. We're just going to leave some, strongly worded voicemails and, file a truancy report on her. Like, what? We're going to show her. Come on, man. You call the police, call social services, call CPS, call somebody. This school, man, when we were all on lockdown and everything was virtual, don't tell me these people didn't have time to just follow up on these kids. You are the first line of defense of child abuse. We all know that. How did you literally let 140,000 something kids in the Houston area just completely fall off the map, and you don't know if they're okay, if they're being fed, if they're being treated well, if they're getting to the doctor when they need to. Come on, man. Come on. These poor kids, I can't imagine what they're feeling now and what long-term trauma they're going to be left with after years of abuse and witnessing the brutal murder of their brother and then being forced to live with his body for a year. One of the police officers who rescued them that day said all 3 boys were, quote, very sweet children, very nice, very well-spoken. At the same time, that 1,000-yard stare, the blankness in the eyes, at the same time, they were as sweet as you could be, end quote. They're good kids, they're sweet, but man, this is gonna leave some scars. This is gonna leave some serious scars. And that little one who had to have facial reconstruction surgery because he got punched in the jaw by his dickhead Brian, oh my God. Oh, I'm so mad. So Brian Coulter is being charged with the first-degree murder of Kendrick. His bond was set at, I believe, $1 million, and he was evaluated by a mental health professional. I don't care what the mental health professional says. Electric chair. But first, lock him in a room with a dead body for a year. And then, not an electric chair. ABC News reported that during Brian's first appearance in front of a judge, he walked in slowly. He asked the judge several questions, and at times it appeared that he didn't understand what he was being asked or what was being said to him. Brian asked the judge to repeat the charges and asked if his sentence was really going to be 99 years to life. Yes, Brian. Yes, it really is. It really is, Brian. This guy's trying to pretend like he's out of it. He's trying to pretend like maybe, I have like a learning disability, or I'm crazy, or I'm mentally unstable. But you can tell, because like he's got videos all over his Instagram, guys. I'll link it in the description box. Go look at this dude's Instagram. I mean, is he like the brightest bulb in the box? Of course not. Of course not. But he's not like unable to understand what's being said to him. Brian Coulter's family put out a statement saying, quote, "This is not who we raised our son to be. Our hearts and prayers go out to those brave children. Our relationship with Brian has been distant for years," end quote. They should have said what. This isn't what we raised our son to be, because Brian is a real-life monster, subhuman piece of toxic waste. He is not human. And obviously, we don't know the deal. We don't know the deal with Brian and his family and their relationship. They could be very distant. They could have had a falling out. They could have seen something in him that made them want to withdraw. Or that could just be, them trying to put distance between what he did and themselves. I don't know. It's too early to tell. But Brian's family had nothing to do with this, besides raising him, which that's a whole nother can of worms. Like, if it ever comes down to we discover that there was abuse in Brian's past, like that he was abused as a child, that may be a different story, but somehow I doubt it. Somehow I think that this guy is just a violent dickhead, and that's the extent of it. A violent dickhead who picks on people and children who are smaller and weaker than him, because he's pretty small and weak himself. Gloria Williams, the other piece of toxic waste, was charged with felony injury to a child by omission and tampering with evidence. In court paperwork, it said that the police found evidence that she had altered, destroyed, and concealed the body of her son in order to get rid of the evidence of the crime. I'm not sure exactly what she did. That hasn't been revealed yet, but Gloria did sit down and talk to Houston reporter Grace White, and Gloria said she was sorry, but she didn't do it. And when Grace White asked if Gloria had known Kendrick was dead, she said no, because she's a piece of shit lying liar. Gloria also said she checked on the kids every 2 weeks, which also is not true, because she was only sending food over once a month. Sometimes she would use a delivery service to send the food, so she wouldn't even go herself, and it was always crap, like chips and soda. God forbid you should give your children like a freaking apple or a piece of broccoli. And that is where we are. Hopefully both of these individuals rot in prison for the rest of their lives. I really would, like more punishment, some torture, some Hunger Games type of thing, like put them both on an island with like these medieval weapons and see who comes out alive, and then lock that person in a room with the dead body of the other. Like, I could come up with tons of stuff, but probably they'll just go to prison. I bet you Gloria doesn't even go to prison for the rest of her life. I bet you she doesn't have murder charges. Now, they could be upgraded if they find out more. They did say that more charges could be added. She doesn't have murder charges right now, and I don't know how they can prove unless he turns on her and testifies against her, but she'll probably be out 7 years. I don't know. And hopefully they will be tortured by the guilt of what they did. But I highly doubt it, since neither of them seems to be an extremely compassionate or good person. And it's very likely that their only regret ever for the rest of their lives will be getting caught. And that's my say. That's what I have to say. That's my 2 cents. I am just so pissed and frustrated. Let me know what you guys think about this case in the comment section. I'm sure there's going to be many people who are like, you're so mean. You're so mean. I don't care. Guys, I don't care. That's why you don't seem to get that. I don't care. I'm a nice person. I am a really nice person. But these people are like child killers, okay? Child abusers. And while I will say, as an intelligent person with a brain, there are certain cases where child abuse is involved, where I can still denounce what the person did, but say, I understand where this was coming from, post-traumatic stress disorder, or postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis, things like that completely like change your brain chemistry and the hormones and chemicals in your body, and they really turn you into someone else sometimes. So I can say I understand. I'm not saying it's okay. I'm not saying that I forgive them or that I don't think they're bad, but I understand what triggered it and what could have been a contributing factor. In this case, I understand none of this, okay? I have no understanding. I have no compassion, and I hate them. And I hate them, and I hope that they suffer for the rest of their lives. And I don't care if you think I'm being mean, all right? I don't care. People like this don't deserve my respect, and they certainly don't deserve your respect. And that's all I have for today. I'm sorry. I know. I was going off. I'm in one of those moods. I just felt like I was an open nerve, like a raw nerve, just exposed to the air. And there was nothing that was going to sort of like dampen anything that I had on my mind. So here we are. And I appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to like the video if you like the video. Make sure to share it if you think it's worth sharing. I do think this one is worth sharing. Like I said, the more you know. The more you know. Knowledge is power. So share it if you want. Subscribe if you haven't already. I know a lot of you are watching but not subscribing, and I don't know why, because I like it here, and I think a lot of other people do too. So come join the community. Subscribe. Make sure you leave a comment. Let me know what you think. Thank you guys so much for being here. Stay kind, stay beautiful, and stay safe.
Don't break now, and the bottle's going straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're going back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. So you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings, blood on the strings, blood on the strings. Thin plates on my face don't bleed. Got blood on the strings, blood on the strings, blood on the strings. Lord knows it's been a rough week. Channeling my son house.